NDIS information session. Just a little bit of background. My name is Matthew Gordon. I work for an organisation called OurSay. We've been working with Darebin City Council to facilitate both the online forum and discussion, as well as a couple of these information events. We've got Katrina Knox, who's Director for Community Development, and we've also got Bridget Munro-Hobbs, who's Manager of Age and Disability. These guys are on the team that are providing recommendations to Darebin City Council, the councillors, that we make a decision around their role within the NDIS and what kind of services and activities that Darebin City Council will be running with in the rollout of this, in transition to the new NDIS program.
Thanks, Matt, and thank you everyone for this evening. I know it's precious time in your day to come out, but so we hope that the information we give you tonight and some of the discussion we had is really useful to you. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and land on which we meet this evening, the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. We know that a lot of people here today came to our session on February the 11th. But for those of you who didn't, and just to refresh some of the information, we're just going to go back and revisit a few of the basic information that we have around the NDIS. So what is the scheme? It's a National Disability Insurance Scheme, is the NDIS, and the agency that it operates under is the National Disability Insurance Agency. It is an insurance scheme, as the name says. It's a bit based on the TAC model. It's based on providing more power for individuals, when the money is spent and what services the money is spent on. So that's the power is with the individual in the circumstance, and that's a real change from the traditional way that service delivery has happened, and even the way that Darebin has provided services in the past. As you would know, we do an assessment of someone and we offer them services. In this respect, this is a very different model. It's giving the power back to the person with a disability or the carer or their family in this situation. So, who is eligible? So, as it says there, people who had a disability, be they under the age of 65 at the commencement of the scheme. So anybody who's over 65 at the commencement of the scheme stays in the HAC system as an aged care service. However, if you turn 65 year old in the next few years and you're on the scheme, you just stay in the scheme. You need to be an Australian citizen, live in Australia. I know this is just really interesting. Live in Australia and hold a permanent visa or hold a protected special category visa. So I think we saw this slide before. How is it different? The money comes from the government to the service provider, in this case for us, Darebin, and we then give it out to you in services rather than in dollars. Under the NDIS, the government will give the person with a disability or the carer or in this circumstance, and then they go out and they negotiate and use that to purchase services through a service provider. So that could be us, or it could be some other specialist service. So what we've done to date. At the moment, we have been pretty busy. I know someone actually said to us at the last meeting, why is it taking so long for us to get moving? One of the reasons it did take that long was that we only found out in October, November last year that we were actually in the first run of services, because the government just didn't let anybody know until the last minute. So we've tried to move as fast as we can now when we found out. So we've had some joint local forums. We've started the OurSay, and that started in January. We've had 2 meetings with the Darebin Disability Advisory Committee, and we're looking to get a final statement from them in the next little while. We've had a meeting of the Healthy and Active Ageing Board, and I members from here there. We've also had the online OurSay that's been going for quite a long time. So how many comments do you reckon by now? It's been pretty big.
Yeah, we've had about 30 or 40 comments and over 1,000 people visit the site.
Yeah. So it's been pretty extensive. And just to let you know, we've had 4 briefing sessions with the councillors, and at the last counselling session we actually took a lot of the comments up until that date, which was about 2 weeks ago. Careful to de-identify them, but we provided the councillors with all those comments up until about 2 weeks ago, just so they could read through it and get the flavour of it, because we do want you to understand that we are providing as much information to council as we can of your voice and what you were trying to say to us about the future and direction of services for people with disability under the NDIS and how council will play their role. So, what you've told us. So these are up to date. These are the things that you've told us are key to working. So we're looking at community forums. The key themes have been around advocacy, provision of information, building capacity, and maybe becoming a service provider under the NDIS. The Darebin Disability Advisory Committee has specified, told us that it's important that we work in the advocacy space again, about providing information and support, and again, building capacity. So I think there's some themes that you can see here that people think that council might be best placed in. The Active and Healthy Ageing Board were very firm to us about where they wanted to move, and we've relayed that back to council. They think that we should probably that we should exit out of direct service delivery, except for people who are under 65 and ineligible for the NDIS. And I think what's really important for you to understand in that comment was how important they felt that the people who were ineligible and were going to fall through the gaps, that's where council really needed to pick up the game and continue to support those people. So yes, the NDIS and that's important, but for people who aren't eligible for the NDIS or will fall through the gaps, and we know there will be people who do that council really play an important role in that respect. And again, they wanted council to provide advocacy and support people with the planning process. And that advocacy isn't just general advocacy, it was advocacy on an individual level and support on an individual level. So it's not just to say we just go to government and say, people with disability need this and this and this. It's about in the planning process, if people are struggling and they need help and support through that process, that we will be there to stand up for them. So we also just wanted to provide you with a little bit of statistical information on disability as it is within Darebin. According to their census, it was the 2011 census, people who recorded in the census that they had a disability were 8,500 for the Darebin region. Of those, 2,845 were aged under 65. So the rest are, that leaves you with about 5,000 people over 65 who will just stay in the accident if they came across. In our service delivery, so the amount of clients that receive services from council at the moment is that sort of reddish book, which is 656 people. So out of those 2,000, we service about 656. Of those, we think about 400 people will be eligible for the NDIS. So we're left with around that 256 people who won't be eligible and will continue to need services, and they'll be supported through the state. And they're the people that, as we said, we don't want to lose them, and we want to provide a lot of support for those people.
Okay, so that was just a bit of an introduction into kind of really where we're at. I'm sure there's a lot more questions and issues that you guys want to bring up. And what we're going to do is something a little bit different. Through the online forum, we actually got a lot of really good questions, a lot of challenging questions for council. We wanted to spend the next little time actually going through some of those key questions and themes that have come up through that process. What I've done behind the scenes is actually speak directly to some of the people that made a submission online to really understand where they're coming from. And a lot of the submissions that were put online attracted a lot of votes and a lot of comments from the community. So we're and they tend to be issues and themes that keep recurring over and over. So we're going to spend a little bit of time actually just covering those off first, and then hopefully that gives us a good basis of a discussion for your questions later. But I wanted to turn to the first issue, which was the role of council in all this. And one of the people who made a submission, who's unfortunately not here tonight, Hannah Mazzio, is actually quite concerned that we're having this discussion about whether Darebin City Council is going to be participating as a service provider in the NDIS. And I might just, if it's okay, I might just read out what Hannah had to say. Hannah and her partner live with a disability here in Darebin, and so I think it's just really important that we hear what her question was. And she said, I was surprised after attending the NDIS forum last week to learn that Council was still considering whether or not to register as a service provider under the NDIS, especially with the scheme less than 20 weeks away. And it's actually less than that now, it must be 10 weeks away. And I'd simply assumed that Council actually would be engaged in this space. So I might throw it to you, Bridget. Where are we at with that decision?
So we've had to do a lot of thinking and a lot of unpacking around the services that we provide currently under the Home and Community Care Program. We've looked at the NDIS and what it hopes to achieve, and it hopes to achieve amazing things for people with a disability, and it hopes to give them greater opportunity and greater power over the services that they access and the services that are available. The services that we provide, like Katrina said, are not disability specialist services. They're home and community care services. So they're basic, and we actually go into people's homes and deliver services. The NDIS scheme is really about getting people out of their homes into the community, fully participating in life, and improving their quality of life as well. Currently, we're block funded by the government, so under the NDIS scheme, we would not be block funded. We would deliver services, and then we pay for those services in arrears. And the gap between what it costs us per hour of service delivery and what the NDIA would fund us for is greater than it currently is. So currently, it costs us more than what we get funded for from the state and Commonwealth government, and Council fills that gap. The gap will grow even greater, and that's become more of an important conversation for us because we now have rate capping that's coming in, and what rate capping means is our ability to generate our own income will be determined by the local government minister. So we really have to look at what is it that we do really well, what's really important for us and what's important for the community, and focus on those things. So that's why we're here today, thinking around, well, are we best placed to deliver services in the NDIS space, or are there other things we could do that are more meaningful for our community?
So does that mean, are we sort of still kind of judging or doing that research about whether we've got can offer the best value for the services, or whether that's something that we're not going to participate in? I mean, what's the level of research that's been done today about that? Yeah. Both the financial bit as well as the social bit, the fact that Darebin is a trusted local authority that has deep connections with the community. Have those sorts of things been brought into the kind of research question?
Yeah, we've unpacked everything because it isn't just a financial decision. Council has an important role to play in supporting communities. So the things we've unpacked are finances. We've unpacked how competitive we could be in an NDIS marketplace, because really the NDIS is setting up a competitive market where people get to choose where they have their services provided from, and that creates competition. And how marketable are we as a service provider? What is our touch point with the community? What is it that people find really meaningful about us and the services that we provide? What does that mean in terms of if we do provide services in the NDIS, what kind of infrastructure do we need to support that? So we've pretty much looked at everything. Myself or Katrina or my staff don't get to make that decision. That decision gets made by the councillors, and that will be in mid-April now that they will make that decision. So my job is really to give them all the available information around what you've said it is as a community, what the financial implications are, what our future looks like, so they can make a really fully informed decision.
Is there a risk in the rollout of the NDIS that there are going to be people who are getting local services that won't be able to get those local services because Darabin may not be there anymore? And when I'm talking about that, the local services, I'm not necessarily talking about whether they'll have access to a specific service or not, but things like, ability to make appointments on weekends or after hours, or some more of those convenience opportunities.
We're pretty lucky in Darabin. We have a lot of local service providers that do provide similar services to us and more above and beyond what we provide. So we're pretty lucky in that respect that we already have a marketplace that's available. I think it's important to note too that things won't change for us as a provider on the 1st of July 2016. So any decision that the council has made, I would be thinking it would be a 12-month transition plan to support people so they feel comfortable and supported with potential new providers if that's the decision council makes. So I think it's important to note that there wouldn't just be, okay, that's it. We would work individually with those 656 clients to support them to transition to the new environment.
I mean, that's a bit of a relief. One of the concerns is that, the fact that it's 10 weeks away and we're still having this kind of discussion as to whether we're participating. And I appreciate that the timelines aren't necessarily your timelines. It's kind of been put out by the agency, the NDIA, and that's been challenging. Is council also looking at, where some of the trials have been leading up into this to kind of sort of support the transition process? I think Barwon, there's been some experiences. Have we sort of looked at the pros and cons and, some of the outcomes and perhaps the poor outcomes that might have come out of those trials?
We've talked to Geelong a lot around what their experience has been, because they did continue to deliver services through the Home Community Care Program in the trial site. So we've taken all of that on board. They had a lot of difficulty. They had to put in a lot of extra money to make that model sustainable. And it's important to note, we met with the National Disability Insurance Agency yesterday, so that was amazing. That's the first time we sat in a room with them, and they've had a two-way conversation with us about we exist and here's what we're planning to do. So that was, it's frightening in terms of the work they have to do before the 1st of July, but it was great to actually hear that they do have a plan, and apparently that plan will be announced very, very soon. But they have a rollout schedule, so it's a long time frame, longer than I thought it would be, even though they're saying we'll start on the 1st of July. And they're also, one of the clear messages they gave us yesterday was, what happened in the trial site, it's a trial site. It was a pilot site. What's going to happen in our area, so in the North East Melbourne area, is full scheme, and full scheme will look completely different to pilot sites. So they're saying, take the information that you've heard from the pilot sites, consider it, but don't base everything on what happened in the trial site as what's going to happen in full scheme, because full scheme and pilot is completely different.
Okay. So
that makes sense.
Well,
apparently they've learned a lot.
Yeah,
It's not to say they're not still building the model as they go, but full scheme versus pilot, completely different ballgame.
Okay. What are we sort of thinking around ensuring kind of a justice outcome and making sure that Darabin is going to be there for people where there has been market failure in this scheme, given that it's never been done before, given the size of the change and the transition?
I think one of the things I've found most interesting through the Our Say forum and when we talk to people is that people see council as an information provider and as a body that can advocate on their behalf when things are not working out the way that they would like. And that's been really interesting for me to hear, because sometimes we do get really focused on that direct service delivery and forget about what's most important, which is building capacity within a community so it can sustain itself and it feels supported. We currently do that work in the Age and Disability Department, but I think it's important to say if we don't deliver services into the future to people who are under 65 and NDIS eligible, we would build up that unit and do more of that community engagement, community capacity building, information provision, advocacy work.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be we lose something and we don't gain something else.
Okay. So there's the model, I mean, for Darabin still needs to be worked out, but there's going to be, in all likelihood, you know, we may be participating in some services. We're certainly going to be advocating at the local level, ensuring that, you know, we're building up that local capacity.
Yep.
What does that mean in terms of, I mean, you mentioned rate capping.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't know, rate capping is the state government's put a limit on the ability for local governments to increase rates beyond inflation, which is kind of putting some financial pressure on council. I mean, surely providing the services and getting the sort of the rebate back through the NDIS means that, you know, some of these services would be at a neutral cost to Darabin, and it wouldn't be a, would that be the case? Or?
No, none of the services we provide are a neutral cost. Unfortunately, or fortunately, because of the services that we provide, it costs us more per hour than what we currently get funded, and it will cost even more per hour once the NDIS scheme comes into play. So there's no cost neutrality in the services we deliver, even with funding and even with the contribution that clients make through the fees.
Have you got an example of how that, what those numbers look like, just so that everyone can get their head around it?
Yes, I do. Let me go back into my brain. Okay.
Sorry.
So, just trying to think.
Well, I think we said, didn't we say that,
So it costs us about $75 an hour for domestic assistance, and we currently get funded $45 an hour. And that's a 7 till 7 rate, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. We don't change that cost to the client if we deliver on the weekend as well. So it costs us even more on the weekend, but we still only get $45 an hour.
Okay, all right.
That's
and
just
the
an example.
NDIS, and that is about
$250.
Yeah. So you can see there's another gap.
Okay. So, I mean, there's a big kind of concern, I imagine, within the community here is that, you know, there's going to be a race to the bottom because it's now competitive.
Yeah.
And, you know, does that mean we're not going to get the same quality? You know, can Darabin compete on quality of services and those sorts of things? I mean, have we got any thoughts or reactions to that challenge from you guys?
I think what we have to remember is just because we pay more doesn't mean, I mean, the quality of our service is very good, and none of us will deny that now. You know, we've got our lovely workers here today, and they work very hard and they work really, really well. But the dollars doesn't necessarily always mean service, mean quality of service. That's not to mean if, you know, another service delivery community, someone, you know, we have agencies who provide services for us, such as Spectrum, who provides special services to people, especially from our coal communities. Now, the services that we receive from them are of a high quality, and we have very happy clients who are serviced by them. So, whilst, you know, we're very proud of the services we offer and the quality of the services, I can't hand on heart say that our services far outstrip anybody else just because it costs us more to do it.
I think too, Geelong City Council did continue to, or are still providing services under the NDIS scheme, but in order to make that affordable, they've had to cut back on the flexibility. So they can't deliver services after 7 p.m. anymore, they can't provide services on a Saturday or a Sunday or a public holiday. So whilst they're still in that space and still that trusted provider, the flexibility that they provided for their community has now diminished. So that's important to consider too, that some of that's the service scope and some of the flexibility in individualised service has dropped off so they can just financially survive.
Okay. But I just want to finish off the idea and question that Hannah Matteo put forward. One of her other ideas or questions was about like the definitions that are coming out of the NDIS. And I'll just read her submission if I may. The NDIS is underpinned by choice and control and what is reasonable and necessary, What are the practical terms around choice mean? Is that about simply a choice of service provider?
So I said we met with the National Disability Insurance Agency yesterday, and I must say I was really heartened by the conversation we had with them. They really wanted to know from us what are the major concerns coming out from the community, what is it that the community really wants to understand and know more about, and how do we access those communities so we can give them that message. And one of the clear statements we made to them is, your language is completely different to what we currently use. I don't understand it, the community doesn't understand it. You need to actually unpack that and explain to the community what does choice and control mean, what does reasonable and necessary mean, because they don't mean anything at the moment, and you need to unpack that so people can understand, what their choice actually is. And then they did let us know if you currently receive disability services, so if you're on the DSR, if you're on an ECHAS waitlist, if you're on an ISP, Futures for Young Adults, any disability-specific program that you might receive, you will shortly receive a letter and you'll be personally invited along to what will be 56 sessions across North East Melbourne area to talk in more detail around what the NDIS means for you. So that's great in terms of, starting to get that information out there.
And people will find out about that also through Darren. You guys will be
we'll be sending out, so anyone that's attended sessions tonight or previously will be on our email contact list, and we'll let you know when all the sessions are happening, how you can access them.
Okay. I'm going to move on to another issue that also has come up numerous times. It came up in the information session that we ran here about a month ago, but also featured quite highly in the forum. I'm going to read a couple of submissions. One's from Sarah Morosky, and it's about some of the gaps in the system. I mean, this NDIS change, in many respects, it's a huge social change. It's like kind of up there with universal healthcare and the rollout of Medibank and all of them. So there's always the risk of gaps emerging in this new change. So Sarah Morosky's submission, which I'll read, step into some of the spaces left by the NDIS to support individuals and carers who are overlooked by this system and many others, e.g. homeless, many sufferers of mental illness who are not classed as permanently disabled, drug users, etc. I want Darabin Council to be my champion when struggling to care for a son with a developmental condition and a mental health issue, because no other level of government will help me. And before we get into that, I'll just read another one from Jane Luna, who actually incidentally got the most votes this submission. We need to continue to provide support and advocate for those who fall between the cracks of the system. I'm on the DSP, yet I'm not eligible for the NDIS. There are so many people living with invisible disabilities, including chronic illness, that severely impact their lives, and who need support to manage things that others take for granted. I currently receive a home care service through the council. Will the state government provide funding for programs to support those that are excluded in the NDIS, and how does Darren pick up that? So I might get your reactions to those two submissions.
So the state government has committed to support people who are under 65 years of age and not NDIS eligible. And in all our recommendations to council, we're saying we would still like to deliver direct services to people who are not NDIS eligible and under 65 years of age. The state government, because it's losing a significant amount of its funding and also its connection with local government and the work it does around capacity building, has made a clear statement that vulnerable communities, people who fall through the gaps, will be their next priority area. So they're really looking to build and develop the service system so people don't fall through the gaps, more early intervention. So I think that's really great to hear as well. That won't be a big hole left by the NDIS, that the state government's actually going to pick that up and work with local government to continue to develop and build capacity in that space.
Okay.
I just think to reassure community members too, is that if council said, one of the things that we've said to council is whatever decision you make, we want to ensure that the vulnerable people who aren't eligible and fall through gaps, we want to ensure and continue, like we can't stress strongly enough how we would continue to advocate to keep services for those people operating. Be very reassured that that's a real commitment from us to council and ensuring to say to council that those people who are not NDIS eligible need to be cared for, and council has a role to play in that.
Okay. Thank you for that. There's a question just on the front. Would you mind standing up if possible?
How do we find out if we are eligible? Where do we go?
Okay. You go onto the National Disability Insurance Scheme website. There is actually, Chris, is it called an access checker? So you can plug in your details on the access checker that gives you an idea of whether you're eligible or not. If you're receiving other disability-specific services, it's highly likely you will be eligible. We've talked to the NDIA yesterday too about there are a whole group of community members who are not registered anywhere, who Department of Health and Human Services don't know. How do they actually get onto the scheme? So there is a 1-800 number that you can call, and that's on the website. But the NDIA are actually looking at a more streamlined process for the North East Melbourne catchment area, which is what we are. But you can try and go through that process and see where you get to. If you don't get anywhere, give us a call and we'll help navigate that for you.
So it sounds like a big role for Darebin is that kind of that defender of people within the community that might be falling through the gaps and need that extra advocacy or help, or ensure that there's continuity of care that's been managed.
Yeah, and I think, as we said before, if we would build up that community capacity building and advocacy arm to provide greater capacity to support people who are likely to fall through the gaps. I think you're mentioning that at the moment it's quite limited in terms of our reach, but ideally we want to build up that arm of the department and provide greater capacity. And I said before that the state government's taking a real interest in that area and developing that, and that's only a good thing.
So that means if the NDIS covers some services that we've been paying and we exit those services, the money saved can then go into bolstering that function in more.
Is there an appeal process by which people will be able to appeal if they're not found eligible?
Is there an appeals process, Chris?
Yes, there is, absolutely. People are actually encouraged to appeal decisions around their eligibility or around their plan. If it's not successful or not the response that they were hoping for, you're encouraged to appeal. There is a process, information is on their website, and you can access support as part of that appeals process as well.
Thanks, Chris. I think it's important to acknowledge too that I know tonight feels quite sombre, but I'm actually quite excited about the National Disability Insurance Scheme and the opportunities it provides to people with a disability. So I think it's important to say this is major social reform. There are lots of opportunities. And it's not just about the Age and Disability Department, because we have a legislative obligation to people with a disability across the whole organisation. And I think we also have an amazing opportunity to build the new marketplace within the city of Darebin. So what do the new services look like? How can we build in innovation but still maintain quality and safety for people? And I think that's really exciting to be at the forefront of creating a Darebin that is an amazing place for people with disabilities to live in.
Thank you for that. I'm going to bring up another submission that came through online. This came from a woman by the name of Kate McKinnon, who works for Continence Australia. Her question actually was about the local area coordination, the LAC, which is helping with planning. It's about linking participants of the NDIS with service providers and ILC providers. It's about providing advocacy for people who do not have a good support system and can't advocate for themselves, and about providing information regarding the NDIS processes, application, eligibility. So there's another role. There's the service provision role, and then there's this local area coordination role. What's going to be Darebin's relationship with the local area coordination? Is that something that they're participating in?
We can talk.
We can talk a little about that. The local area coordination was put out to tender. People who operate, local area coordination was put out to tender. If you're a service deliverer, you can't be a local area coordinator because that's the planning side of things. So that's a bit like they did the Telstra bit. You can't be an assessor and a deliverer. So that's how that sits. Within the LAC, there's the planning component, but there's also the community capacity building. What I can't talk about the provider, but what council have done is formed a statement of intent with one person who was applying for the LAC, where they recognise our role is very important in terms of being able to work with the community and in that community capacity building space. So we will hear the outcome of the LAC, I believe, next week, hopefully. And if the organisation that we've signed this statement of intent with is successful, there's an opportunity for us to really ramp up that area, and that again is that community capacity building, that's the support, it's the advocacy, it's all those things that we think we can really be strongly active in and what we are good at. Chris's role in Metro Access is that community capacity building. That's really important, and that's going to be rolled into, we believe, into that LAC process.
Okay, so if we're going to be a service provider, we can't be a local area coordinator because the local area coordination is about directing people to services, and presumably the conflict of interest is we direct them to our services. Don't go to those guys, come to us.
That's right.
So there's a conflict there. So that needs to be managed. The way we manage is actually by partnering with another organisation, that will be the LAC, who sees benefit in partnering with Darebin because there's some natural extension of the existing roles and the functions that we already have, for example, the Metro Access Officer and all that sort of stuff. So it's an opportunity to do better connection.
If we were just to work in that space, what we have to do is create one of those walls that people talk about. So, which is possible, but it would be splitting our capacity across those.
We're crossing our fingers and toes that the agency that we have a statement of intent with actually is successful in the tender, because that will force a very strong relationship. Having said that, if that doesn't come off, we will be working very, very closely with the provider of the LAC to ensure that we're front and centre and that they're working closely with us.
Okay. And just a further question to bring up the Metro Access role. There was another submission on the forum from Sarah Boyd, who said, aside from the NDIS, we need community connections. This is for many reasons, which are obvious, we hope. We need state government to maintain the Metro Access program. This connects us with the local services, it influences council's many projects. For example, it influences infrastructure and the way we design our footpaths and roads and those sorts of things. And it means people with a disability don't necessarily receive disability services, still have the mobility, the ability to connect and maintain a normal life within the municipality. Is the Metro Access role impacted by the NDIS, what's the interaction between that, the NDIS and the LAC?
Chris, would you like to answer that? Chris is our Metro Access worker.
We should get you a chair up here, actually.
Yeah, we should.
Yep. So, very quickly, those who are not familiar with the Metro Access position or its title, I'm not employed by Metro Trains. Metro Access is a state-funded position. I've actually been at council in the position for 8 years, last week. So Metro Access is a state-funded position to sit within local councils. So we're in every local council across Victoria. And in the rural and regional areas, there are rural access officers and there are also deaf access officers. So the responsibility or the mandate, I suppose, objectives of our role are to do community capacity building. So whilst I sit within Age and Disability at Council, I don't do direct service delivery. It's about engaging the community to be more accessible and inclusive for our residents with a disability. It's about providing information, provision, awareness raising, and implementing projects and programs that raise the capacity of the community. Having said that, we are only a state-based program, and under the National Disability Insurance Scheme, the program is unconfirmed at this point in time, as it would require it to be rolled out nationally. DHS, I believe, have been advocating, DHHS, have been advocating very strongly for the continuation of the Metro Access program under the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Council have been, again, feeding that information and advocacy up to the councillors. So it might not necessarily mean that the Metro Access title or role is specifically continued under the NDIS or from a council perspective, but the Metro Access program is very strongly aligned with the objectives of the information linkages and capacity building stream. So I envisage large components of the Metro Access program, either transferring over to ILC components for council, or if not, continuing, but the funding is unconfirmed at this point in time.
Thank you for that.
That's right.
Now, we've covered sort of 4 or 5 main issues that come through in the submissions on the forum. We've talked about the role of Darebin. We've talked about the issues of definitions and a lack of forthcoming information that's coming from the NDIA and what's happening about that.
I feel that it's getting better though.
It's getting better, okay. Our friends now?
Yeah.
The NDIA,
Yeah.
okay. And gaps in the system has been brought up, as well as lack and other services. I guess now it's time for you guys. Are there any other questions that we need to be addressing? We've got one over here and another here. But I encourage anyone else who would like to put up questions to put your hand up as well, and we can come around to you. If we could grab a microphone, perhaps we've lost our... Thank you.
Is the NDIS is under 65, correct?
Yes.
So if you're 63 and you come on NDIS, it rolls over into your old age.
Yeah, you stay on that for life.
Okay, so then we have 2 tiers of people with a pension and no other support, and people with a pension and extra money. Eventually, all the seniors will have it. Is there any plan to introduce it for the 65 plus who have a disability?
No.
Because
So
that's disenfranchising a whole group of people that don't get anything.
Yeah. So if you are over 65 years of age, you'll be maintained in what's now will be known as the Commonwealth Home Support Program. So our HAP program works with people 0 to 100 plus, but we're getting carved in the middle. So under 65s goes to the National Disability Insurance Scheme, over 65s goes to the Commonwealth Home Support Program.
Yeah, but you lose the choice and you can't get the same services other
My
you can get in NDIS.
Yeah, that's true to some degree. However, the Commonwealth Home Support Program will be working to providing individuals with a bucket of money, and they go out and choose their providers. So a similar model.
There's a question around this continuity of care going up to 2019, and I'm interested to know how that works with the NDIS.
There's a lady over.
We'll pick up the question over there in a minute, but I just wanted to bring up the continuity of care promise or provision that the government's put forward to sort of say that no one's going to be worse off up until 2019. Is there any, do you guys have any thoughts or knowledge around how that's actually going to work?
I can't comment on the broader Darebin community, but I can comment on the clients that we provide services to. So we will be, if we're not a deliverer of services into the future, we will support people to transition to the program. So we will support them to build relationships with a new provider if that's required, support them to build trust, whatever it is that people need, we will do that individually, one-on-one with them. to make sure that people feel supported and secure in the transition.
Okay, so 1st of July, it's not like D-Day and
No, we
100%
don't.
shifting.
I think it's going to take us 12 months if we decide not to stay in the business of service delivery. It'll take us 12 months to support our 656 clients to transition and feel supported.
Okay. We've got another question here. Jennifer. Thanks.
My understanding there is, as a ballpark figure, say the person is allocated $20,000 for the year. If at the end of that year they've only spent $15,000, that other $5,000 goes back in the government's coffers.
Yep.
Fine. Does that mean that that person is only going to get allocated $15,000 the next year?
No.
That's not my understanding.
Because some years with mental health, with disabilities, you can be travelling really well. You may not need the support services, whereas the following year you might end up in a screaming heap.
Do they manage that money themselves, or does that money go to a third party and then you have to apply how that money's going to be used?
But basically, funding is allocated to the individual through the plan. They can choose to self-manage their money. They can choose to self-manage a portion of their money. They can choose for the agency to manage their money, or they can choose for a third party to manage. Category information is listed on the website, but there is an expectation that the NDIS will interact with interface sectors, which are education, health, employment. So all of those sectors still have an obligation and a responsibility to continue to provide the services that they always have, and they will not necessarily be identified or funded for under a category of support under the NDIS. So, for instance, health, education. So a child with a disability might have an NDIS package, but that package does not lend itself, for instance, to support that child in a classroom around literacy and numeracy. There's an expectation that the education department fulfil that role and that support for that individual.
This is all pending council saying yes, they will partake in this scheme. Where do we go if they decide not to? What's plan B?
It's important to note that we do two separate activities. So we do the direct service delivery through the Home Community Care Program, and we do the community capacity building and advocacy currently. So once council makes a decision, we will be talking to the community around, particularly our clients, what that means for them. And that's what I was saying before. We would work with people over a 12-month period to support them to transition, build relationships with other service providers if that's required. So it'll be on an individual basis in terms of what support people need to feel safe and secure within your arrangements.
So, I mean, is it in terms of the decision, is it as simple as we're either going to do this, or is there kind of, we might pull out of some services where it makes sense for us to pull out because we know there are other local providers that are trusted and are going to offer the quality that we expect. That there might be some services that we stay in and also do the advocacy piece. Like, is it simply A or B? Or
we looked at hybrid models, but I think it's important to note too that the services we provide now don't translate directly to the NDIS scheme. So the activities that the NDIS fund look different to the services that we provide now. So if we stayed in, it wouldn't just be business as usual. We would need to relook at all our services, make sure they're in alignment with what the NDIS would fund. So we'd have to really unpack everything, look at what we could provide under the NDIS scheme and what would make us really viable and marketable, I suppose. So what does the community really want? What's our point of difference? So it's twofold. It's not just, we just continue as we were. We'd really need to relook at our service scope and our service offerings.
So, what next? So, on the 18th of April, that's when we're planning to take this decision to council for some form of resolution. We will, based on all the information that we've gathered, and that will be financial, it will be community consultation,
there will be a whole range of factors. We will make a recommendation. However, as we've said previously, the council may accept our recommendation and officers, or they may not, or they may make an amalgam of recommendations. So once that decision is made, we will advise the community of that as soon as it occurs. From April to May, as Bridget mentioned earlier, there will be a range of National Ability Insurance. The NDIA will run a series of information sessions for participants, and they're specific to Darebin. That's right. They will be specific, and they will be quite intense, and a lot of the questions that we aren't able to answer because it's the function of the system of how it operates. Hopefully they'll be able to assist with that. And from July 2016, as we said, the NDIS will roll out and Council will continue to provide service supports. Probably, as we said, we think it'll be around about 12 months rollout. So we're not going to suddenly shut up shop the next day and say, hello, don't ask us any questions or don't ask us for support, because that's not our role, and it's we do want to continue operating in this space.
Okay, guys, thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.
Information-wise, it was good, but quite frankly, some of the people up there, they're talking politics, and we don't understand politics. Some of the questions I felt were answered in a political way rather than in a human way. Does that make sense?
Have you got an example? It's good feedback to be getting.
Yeah, I asked what's plan B if Darebin Council says no, they don't want to partake in the NDIS, and she really didn't say that they have a plan B.
It was very good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I've travelled 3 hours to come, and it's been very informative and respectful, and answered questions we didn't know we had. So and presented really well.